Hello, and welcome back to the Trans Talk Hub podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa, along with Braxton.
Hello again, everyone.
Welcome, welcome. And today we're going to talk about not so much the presidential debate per se, but we are going to talk about the two candidates, Trump and Biden. And, you know, before I get into that, just as a precursor, I don't personally like either one of them for a full choice, but we don't really have an alternate choice. So basically, we're just going to kind of talk about both of them, their stances, things they've done or not done in regards to things that may affect trans people. So, what's your take on that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a super political person. Like we kind of talked about, trans politics is kind of obviously something that I'm going to be involved in, but the rest, I kind of like to keep my own peace, and that does not invite peace into my life. So I typically avoid it. But yeah, no, I agree. I don't think that either candidate is necessarily great. I know we have like independent candidates, RFK and things like that are running, but that just doesn't. I'm trying to be realistic here, right? It just doesn't typically happen that way. But yeah, there's definitely both sides that have something to do with the trans politics, which, like I said, is something that I am definitely involved in. So more leaning towards that in this conversation, just to avoid speaking on something that I may be ignorant on.
Right, for sure. Now, I think that's important, for us to kind of get out that way. Maybe anyone watching, isn't, I guess, thinking that we're siding with either one of them. We're just talking about these things, how they could or could not affect us, and how we feel about it. So, I guess to kind of kick things off, I guess we'll kind of start off on Trump because a lot of people feel very strongly on both candidates, but especially on the trans angle, I think that. The whole community, maybe not the whole community, but a majority, I think, are pretty afraid that if Trump wins, that it's just going to destroy the trans community as a whole.
Right.
I don't really feel that to be true, but I
No.
guess we'll kind of go through that as we talk about these different things. So I guess first I want to talk about Title IX because Trump did state that he plans to reverse the expansion of Title IX, and he stated verbatim that he would do that on day one. Per se, we know that these people state these things, and it takes a
Right.
little bit longer. But regardless, that was his take: is that on day one he would be reversing the expansion of Title IX. How do you feel about Title IX and its expansion and with the whole colleges and the pronoun thing and how schools can be fined if they don't use the proper terminologies
Right.
and pronouns and things like that. I know for me, I mean, I think it's kind of excessive, like I
Yes.
mean, there's a difference, with like general respect and just like
Right.
disrespect. It's pretty clear. I think even without Title IX, the expansion per se, I think I think there could have been ways, for trans people to still have their situation handled appropriately without
Right.
this to be a thing. And the fact that teachers can lose their job and things like that. I know that there was a case. I won't state it specifically because I don't have the exact fact on it, but I did read
Right.
an article about a Texas school that like teacher that did get fined, and
Hmm.
she may have lost her job. I'm not sure. But there was an issue with a trans person, and I guess because of Title IX, they filed something on that. So, really curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think I've got a lot of thoughts on the pronoun debate and that whole battle that we're facing right now. But in this specifically, I think it's really silly to impose the thought that there can be a fine applied to a mistake when we are humans and we all make mistakes. Now, obviously, there are going to be instances of people truly just being ignorant, right, and being hateful. And I totally understand that that's a thing that is not lost on me. However, when somebody makes a genuine mistake and you slap a fine on it, there's going to be a lot of resentment towards this whole thing now. So now when, they're past the fine, whatever, you think they're really going to treat trans people better because of that? It doesn't really I think it seems like it's like teaching a lesson kind of idea. And that's just not, it's not the way to do it. We can educate people. Like yesterday at work, I got misgendered for the first time in a really long time. Like that does not happen very often at all. And she said yes, ma'am, and I just kind of was like, huh, okay, that's weird. That's a weird feeling, but I didn't blow up at her. I didn't even really correct her because it wasn't a big deal. And I think a lot of it comes down to I know who I am. It doesn't matter what somebody else calls me. So we're just perpetuating this idea that being soft all the time, which while that is a valuable thing, but that being your all the time setting, there's never any reason in there, that gets pretty dangerous, even just for yourself on a personal level. And then when everybody's doing that, then it gets to a societal level, and we see what's happening with that. There's tons of disconnection between people right now, and it's all because of that. So I just think that imposing this is it's not going to do anything. It's just going to counteract a lot of progress that we've made, which seems to be the running theme, unfortunately.
Right, for sure. I feel very similarly with the pronoun thing. I mean, I think it's been a minute since I've been misgendered, but I mean, I have been, of course,
Right.
since me starting. I think like in the very beginning, I was for sure.
Same.
So I know what that feels like, and I don't even think I corrected. I think for me, I think I was just so kind of off put at the moment and kind of
Yeah.
surprised because I thought like I was like, damn, I thought I did decent, that day, but I was just
Yeah.
I just kind of swallowed my words and moved on. It's that simple.
Yeah, it's
Um,
not
and
that
and
deep.
Exactly. And for me, I thought, well, okay, I didn't do something. I wasn't giving you ma'am energy, I guess. So that's why you misgendered me, and that's my problem to work on.
Yeah.
I feel, if somebody sees that, most people aren't trying to be disrespectful. They,
No.
however they see you initially is how they're going to uh, use the whatever pronoun on you, so
Right.
and I get it's for some people maybe they get slightly offended. I mean, I think being taken back is one thing, like, oh, okay, I guess you seen something I didn't.
Right.
But I think leaving it at that is best, and like you said, with the fine being applied to all that seems to be a bit excessive, and I definitely agree with you in the sense that it's not going to further things in a positive way,
Mm-mm.
because these people that are fined, they're gonna now have this disdain towards trans people, and they're not going to treat them any better.
No.
They're going to lose this
Probably
job, and then they're
worse.
going to probably go on a rant.
Exactly. Because now what do they have to lose? You've taken everything from them, so they don't have anything to lose. So at that point, like, can you blame them for being upset with you? Like, they're just going to treat trans people worse than they did before. I thought that was
Exactly.
like the whole idea of activism and speaking out was to bring awareness to like we're people and we should be loved, and then you give them every reason not to do that. It's just like super counteractive. Why would you do that? It it makes no sense to me. So in regards to Trump wanting to reverse all that, be my guest. Be my guest. That is totally fine by me. Doesn't bother me in the slightest. It has that has nothing to do with me. I mean, and again, I said I'm not very political. It's my understanding that Title IX also covers some other areas as well, not just the. So it's kind of like a few things, kind of all encompassed into one thing. Am I correct? Am I thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. It's also like currently under the expansion of Title IX, uh, like within colleges, uh, biological women don't get a choice. Like if they could be roomed with a trans woman whether they like it or not, basically.
Oh, okay, okay,
And so for me, I kind of feel like that's a little problematic,
yeah, can be,
because I think somebody should get a choice. Like,
yeah,
and I'm sure there's women who would be totally fine with rooming with a trans woman.
sure,
But for
yeah,
the ones that don't, I feel like they should have that right.
yep,
I'm paying for college, right? Whether scholarship or not, right? You're still in college. You worked for it, and I think that you should be able to um, have a stance on who you're rooming with.
absolutely, absolutely, 100%. Because it's at that point like there's going to be. It's the same way that like we want the right to be able to transition to be comfortable. They should have the right to be able to room with who they want to room with so that they can be comfortable. It's like a lot of just hypocrisy where we think we deserve this thing that for some reason our actions say that the other side does not. If you oppose me, you don't deserve these things. That's just silly to me. And that's kind of all this that like why would you even want to be roomed with somebody who doesn't want to room with you? That sounds like it's going to be a really awful semester that you paid a lot of money for, more than likely. So I don't know why that's a big deal either. Like that seems like pretty simple. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that trans women should be completely banned from, female dormitories if that's, as far as everything, passage, they don't have a background, that kind of thing, whatever. But there should be, some consent allowed, especially if a person is, pre-op. I know that that sounds a little taboo, but ultimately it's still male genitalia. So they're well within their right to have some concern about that, just based on statistics around assault and things like that. So I don't know. I think that's a silly thing to fight. So if it covers that, yeah, it's still stamp of approval, reverse it. I'm cool with that.
Right, same, because I think that without that expansion to Title IX, what we can do is we can have these like college boards and things like that work on their own protections
Right.
for trans people without it being part of Title IX, but do it the correct way, which is
Hmm.
consent. Hey, there's this trans woman. Are you okay with her rooming with you? No. Okay, cool. What about you? Yes. Perfect. Thank you. You know what I mean? Like something like that. It's like a consent based thing. And
Right.
I've heard some women kind of talk about too, like if they were in college and say they were going through their cycle at that time, that's maybe they don't want a biological male in the room while they're going through that or
Right.
whatever, so I think that also kind of plays a role too, because I have heard women mention that in regards to Title IX, and
Right.
thinking back to, wow, if I was in college I wouldn't want a biological male in there when I'm dealing with that kind of thing. So I think overall, I think the reversal of it would actually be a good thing for the trans community. I do think there should be protections in some manner for trans people. Like I don't think like, oh, you should be forced to room with males because you're biological. I think the decision, like the choice, should be there for women who maybe like they have friends, right, that are women and have
Right.
no problem because they're friends with them, right? They have a history with them, they know them, and they're
Right.
comfortable. They should have the choice of being able to say, hey, I'm totally okay with them rooming with me
Right.
because I
Right.
know them. They're very well accountable. You know what I mean?
Right.
And nothing's going to happen. I think that should happen, but under Title IX, to my understanding, they don't have a choice.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm definitely not for that. And also, just to cover this, I know we say biological male a lot, and we're, kind of alluding back to that fact that I understand. Basically, what I'm trying to get at is that I understand that we're kind of, the idea seems when we're speaking about this that it's like we're focused on the fact that you're still a biological male. You'll never be seen as a woman. That's not the idea at all. It's more so just the fact of the matter. A lot of it comes down to what your body has compared to what the other person's body has, and the potential of a risk, something happening. It has nothing to do with like focusing on the fact that you're a biological male or a biological female. It's the same way that I'm a biological female, but in society, majority of the time, I'm seen as a man, right? It's not to say that we don't see other trans people as what they are presenting as. We're just within the realm of facts, especially when we are talking about a political thing, right? We're talking about something that affects a society as a whole. So we need to talk in factual basis, not feelings and emotions and representation as far as like your identity goes. So hopefully that makes sense. I know that's kind of long winded. I just want to make sure people know that like we respect you, we see you, all that good stuff. We're just talking about reality, the facts.
For sure. Thank you for making that clarification, because
Yeah,
yeah, I
for
don't
sure.
mean any disrespect to other trans people, like we're both two people who recognize our biology. We I think, like you said, within politics it's all based around fact,
Yes.
and so I think that is very important that we talk about biological males, biological females, et cetera, et cetera. Now, like you said, do we discredit other trans people? Like, no, if you're a trans woman, we see it as a woman. If you're a trans man,
Right.
we see you as a man. That is how we view you. But I mean, we view ourselves that way.
Yes.
But
Right.
it's just that within factual contexts, that's very
Yes.
important.
Yep. Yeah. Just to differentiate.
Absolutely. So another thing is federal funding. I know I'm going to read this here. So It says in March, Trump told a crowd in Iowa that he would sign a executive order to cut federal funding for schools promoting critical race theory, what he referred to as transgender insanity, and other content he deems inappropriate related to race, sexuality, or politics. What's your thoughts on that?
That's a lot. That's a lot. I think this is where this gets hard because like I don't want to misquote anything or I'm just not educated on it, right? Like this is literally the first time I'm hearing any of this. Um, I think the use of trans insanity uh, is clearly going to provoke some thoughts. It definitely did when I heard it. I was like, "Excuse me." So you know, in that regard, it's. I think this is what makes it hard to land somewhere because things like that are said. And so at that rate, yeah, it's a little scary. You know, it is a little scary that you know, let's say he gets reelected and things do shift and go south really quick. It's a possibility. So I think things like this are unfortunate because they do make that a reality and make us realize that that is a possibility. Um, but do I disagree with it as a whole? Not necessarily. I get where he's coming from. I can see past the that comment, right? Because I know that there's just other things that he's done that make you make me believe that that's not necessarily what he meant. But who knows?
For sure. No, I agree. Because I don't think he meant like transgender insanity as in the whole thing.
Right.
I think what he's referring to is the insanity of schools pushing this and cutting the federal funding for schools if
Yes.
they continue
Yes.
to push this.
Correct.
That's the insanity that he's speaking to, and I think that's the important thing. Because yes, it is easy for us as trans people to hear that word transgender insanity and
Right.
think, "Oh my God, he wants to get rid of us. He thinks we're crazy." He doesn't like see us for people, you know,
Yeah.
or thinks we're mentally insane or something like that. It's very easy
Yep.
to jump into that side of things. But I've looked over this a bit, and I don't think that he's fully against trans people. I
Right.
think he's just against the pushing of everything, because I think that's, of course, why he wants to cut federal funding for schools, is because they're pushing this, you know, gender theory and ideology and things like that. We know
Critical
California
race.
is
Yeah.
doing
Things
that.
like
We
that. Hmm.
literally showed the post, the exact like
Yes.
letter that was sent um, to parents and things like that
Not even a
for,
consent form. Just a
yeah, it
hey,
wasn't a
this is
consent form.
mandatory.
Exactly. And so there is receipts to back up the fact that this happens. And
Yes.
California is not the only one that's doing it. I don't want to state verbatim, but I know that there is some schools within like the Upper East Coast that
Hmm.
are doing this as well. So you know it is happening across the U.S. And the fact that it's kind of happening state by state is kind of a concerning thing, because we've stated many times that we are actually against that, because we believe in finding who you are yourself.
Hmm.
Because I mean it's important, you know, if you could be misguided in a way if you're taught all these things and you're not really given that opportunity to kind of think on your own.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I have no issues with pulling this out of school in terms of like asking young kids to provide you their pronouns. Why do kids need to worry about that? Now is just like not the time for that. And honestly, like I feel like as a trans person, having a childhood as the sex that I was born is kind of part of it. It's a similarity that I share with pretty much all other trans people, you know, and I don't know why that can't just be this cool thing that we share instead of us constantly trying to run from it. You know, it's okay that that happened. It's part of it. It's part of what makes us trans is this duality. You know, I think that it's just better to embrace it. But teaching kids this, like we've said before, is it's just it can be a slippery slope. I'm not saying it always is. You know, I felt this way for a very long time. I can't say anything. I mean, I was 3 or 4 years old when I first started to realize like something didn't feel right. Obviously, I didn't have a word for it at that age, thank God. But you know, I don't think that kids should be completely blinded from it. It's not that, but like to put it in to a school where the parent has no say so now. And I don't know. I just think it can cause a lot of issues that are so unnecessary. If they're trans, they're going to find out. They're going to know. It will happen. Just let it happen on its own. I don't know why it's like this forced thing now. It used to just be this thing of nature, and now we're just like manufacturing trans people essentially. So I don't know. I'm all for pulling it out of schools. And again, like I said, I don't think the transgender insanity comment is really about. It's not about us, right? And it's not about people like Blair and Buck and those of us that have our heads on our shoulders a little more level. It's about the people that are pushing these things, that are teaching these things. That for some reason the focus is on kids. It's just insanity. So yeah, he pinpointed it, but I do again also understand how that can be taken the wrong way out of context.
Absolutely. No, I see how it can be as well. That's kind of why I wanted to kind of go into that distinction a little bit. But yeah, I mean, we both agree that this should be taken out of schools. And, like as a trans person, like sometimes I look back and I think like, what if things were different? What if I got to transition at a younger age and things like that? Would things have been better? Would my life be better? But I think one thing that we all have to realize is that everything happens in due time.
Yes.
And that's what I've realized is that, and that kind of gets me off of that thought process by realizing that all in due time. Even right now with my progression within transition itself, all in due time. I tell myself that all the time when I'm, maybe my dysphoria is kind of kicking my ass a little bit. I sit back and I think all in due time. I need to
Yeah,
be patient. It's all going to work out.
exactly. And I think that it kind of I've said this before, but it builds the connection with the self. It builds a connection within yourself for yourself, like, and that's important. I think that's a beautiful part of being trans. We've talked about the bad parts. I fully believe that there are beautiful parts of being trans. Don't get me wrong, and a lot of it. One of the biggest that I've got is the relationship that I have with myself now, because I've had to look inward and think about those things and remind myself to be strong, to be resilient. That all in due time, like you said, even now I'm 10 years in and still all in due time. It never goes away. It's a good thing to practice, right? And that's the same in anything in life. Life throws all sorts of stuff at you. It always does. You get the first mess picked up and then you move forward 3 steps. And you're like, damn, there's another mess. Like, how did this happen? That's just how it goes. Transition is no different than that. It's just a part of life. So I don't know. I just I think that I'm for it so far. So far, I'm trans for Trump at this point. So we'll see. Maybe it'll shift. Maybe it'll shift.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I think that's a good quote to live by as a whole. Not even transition
Yeah.
related, just when you're down and you're going through life's situations.
Yeah.
I think to think back to that sort of quote, because that's what I live life by. So I think maybe other people might want to kind of keep that for them as well when they're having a hard
Yeah.
time.
It's a good one.
So I guess now this one is probably the most controversial because
Let's get it.
there's a TikTok live about it every single day.
Oh yeah.
But gender affirming care for minors. So, policy video in January. Trump released a video in January detailing various policies targeting gender affirming care for minors. He proposed pressing Congress to approve a federal ban and implementing several measures to restrict federal funding related to trans issues.
Cool. Again, I'm for it. Again, it's not that I don't think that trans kids exist. I was a trans kid, 100%. I just think that medical transition is no, not even think. I know medical transition is a big decision and it is life altering. And there's a lot of things that don't go back. There's a lot of things that change that even when they explain everything to you, you're not really ready for it. Especially if you're like a hands-on kind of person. You gotta be doing it to understand it fully. You don't get that until you get there. Things are constantly changing. So I just think to allow a child to make a decision that large just seems irresponsible to me. Ultimately, like, sure, I'm not saying that they're not genuinely trans. Some of them are genuinely trans, but there's also a portion of them that aren't, and we can't be the group that preaches equality but only for our side. That's not equality at all. That's just like domination. That's you're not doing what you came here to fight for. Those detransitioners need a fighting chance too. Ultimately,
Right.
even if you go through puberty, you can still transition. There's so many examples of proof out there, and I know that there's a lot of talk about the financial side of it. I get that. Unfortunately, the world we live in, you got to work for the things that you want. And some people, I feel like their parents just failed to teach them that when they were growing up, and now they're having to learn it as an adult, which is hard. That's just how it goes. You got to work for the things that you want. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it teaches us things, and it makes us grow and make mistakes and learn from them and turn mistakes into lessons. And without that, we just get messy, clearly. So I don't know. I think that again, I seal of approval. I'm here for it. I don't think kids should be able to medically transition. I don't think it should be covered. I do think it should be banned. Now, I think there's a lot of debate also on what is a kid, right? Because there's a lot of people who are like, well, what if they're 17, 18? I was a week shy of 18, so it's really hard for me to say anything about that either. So I do think there's caveats when they're getting a little older, but I still think that therapy should be involved for a decent amount of time just to make sure. Start at 16, and by the time they're 17, sure, maybe we can do it if for it's been a consistent thing and this, that, and the other. All the same things that an adult trans person goes through. But for younger kids to do it, and there is proof that it's happening, even if you want to say it's not happening, yeah, it should be banned for sure. I don't see why that's a bad thing.
Right. Yeah, I believe that as well. The thing is too is that, like, for me, when I got on hormones, I was educated on all standpoints, right? But I
Same.
think for me, I still kind of, I don't want to say rushed, but I maybe I didn't really think hard enough about, like, for me, the only like tiny regret that I have is not like waiting to start hormones until I like saved my sperm or whatever, so I could have kids in the future. I
Right.
didn't think about that much. If at all. I was so like, I'm ready to be on hormones. I know how to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go. Like, do I regret hormones as a whole? Absolutely not. But do I regret maybe not waiting a month or two, figuring out like a fertility clinic
Yep.
and how to
Same.
save that so I could have a kid in the future? I do
Yep.
regret that portion a little bit.
Me
And
too.
because as an adult, I made that decision and I slightly regret that portion, that's a thing that could affect a lot of kids and that they're
Yeah.
probably not thinking about because they're too young to think about that kind of thing. I
Yeah.
was an adult and made that decision.
I mean, I was a week shy of 18 and made the decision. I didn't really think about it. I didn't. And now that I'm at this point where I do finally have a partner that I plan on spending the rest of my life with and I want to build a family with and this, that, and the other, I definitely wish I would have been more mindful of that. But because I was younger and I was so eager to look like a man, sound like a man, feel like myself, get away from the dark thoughts, that type of stuff, I just ran right into it. And it's not that I didn't understand that my voice was going to change and that I was going to grow body hair and fat redistribution changes and things like that. I understood all of the bullet points, but I didn't think about that part. And not only that, at 17, essentially, 18, essentially more so, I didn't have the finances then for sure to do any of that, to save any of this. To be able to have my own children in some form of fashion without me having to carry them, of course. I wouldn't have been able to afford that. It wasn't even an option at all, anyways. And so I was just so eager to do it that it was sacrificed. It is what it is. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I think that that's not something that's thought about, and that can impact somebody. I'm pretty strong and pretty resilient, but I mean, sometimes it really bothers me. Sometimes it really really gets to me and it frustrates me. But there's nothing I can do about it. So I just got to move on and keep on trucking. I don't want that for other people.
Right, I feel that, and I think that's why I wanted to bring that up because I think that's the most non-talked about portion of hormones. Because,
Very
like,
much so.
for me, I was slightly affected about a month ago. I use Folks for my hormones, which is like an online clinic,
Mhm.
and I was looking through like different discounts and things like that, and realized that if you got with Folate with Folks, then they would actually give you a discount for the fertility clinics. And I was thinking, wow, I wish I would have known. Like, I wish I would have known that going into
Right.
hormones, because then I could have at least paid the money for a folks account, then used that discount for the fertility clinics,
Yeah.
because under them it was like $500 a year, like for the next 3 to 5 years or something,
Hmm.
um, which isn't terrible. That is manageable, I feel. So it's like I could have put that money into it. I could have been a little bit happier. I could have been set for
Yeah.
the next 5 years, but
Yep.
because I didn't, I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So, no, I mean, I don't see an issue with this. Again, I just don't. I think a lot of the things with Trump come down to fear mongering. Now, I'm not saying he's the best person on the face of the planet, right? I mean, he's done some questionable things for sure. I mean, it is what it is. But I don't think he's near as bad as what people portray or believe.
I totally agree. So on this next one, this is about blocking gender affirming care. Trump stated he would block doctors who provide gender affirming care from Medicare and Medicaid. Now, for me personally, I'm somebody who has insurance through my workplace
Hmm.
that I paid like $200 a check for. You know, I get paid biweekly. I pay $200 every 2 weeks, and that's a lot of money. That's four hundred
Yeah.
dollars a month that I'm paying, and I still have limitations for my care. Somebody who
Right.
has Medicare or Medicaid right now, as of today, if they have state Medicare or state Medicaid, they can have their whole surgery paid for and not spend a dime.
That's crazy.
So for me, that is problematic, because, like, for me, I am having bottom surgery in October. I'm having to pay $3,700, and my insurance is still covering a portion. Otherwise, I'd pay more. But there's
Right.
people under Medicare and Medicaid who are getting that all for free. I'm against that because of that reason.
Yeah, because I mean, then correct me if I'm wrong, and if you don't know in the comments, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm pretty sure that for those services, Medicare, Medicaid, you can't make over a certain dollar amount. So that to me just seems like motivation to not make more money, to not go out and work for things, which then leads to a habit of just being lazy and not taking care of things for yourself. And then we get into a way deeper issue societally with those kinds of minds out and about, making calls and decisions in whatever way that happens. That's just it's gonna breed chaos. That's not. I don't know. No, not for that.
Yeah, no, I'm totally, well. I'm for him doing that, but I'm totally
Yes,
against
yes,
the Medicare and Medicaid covering these people 100%, because, like you
yes.
said, it is 100% based on how much you make, whether you fit the requirement for Medicare or Medicaid on a state level. But, like, I have friends who got FFS for free, got
Yeah,
their breast augmentation for free, and it's like, that's crazy to me, because I'm over here working my ass off to save $3,700. So by October, it doesn't get canceled. You know what I mean?
right.
But those people don't have to worry
And
because
it's not to
it's
say that
fully
I'm
paid for.
not. Yeah, exactly. And it's not to say that I'm not happy for those people, that they feel happy with themselves and comfortable and all that. That's great. I'm super, happy for you in that regard. But it's just, especially to be like 10 years in and I'm very independent. I don't, I've got passion projects and other things that I want to do with my life. So unfortunately, like, I got to make money to fuel that and survive. So I've just kind of always had to have money and make enough that I would never qualify for something like that. So I haven't been able to afford top surgery because I have to pay for it myself, and I've got to pay for insurance to even get them to cover some of it, not even all of it. It's still a decent chunk of money with them covering whatever. So it's just like, for the side of things that preaches fairness and equality and all that, again, it comes back to, it's like, is it really that, like, is it really fair? Is that really fair for, you know, taxpayer money to have to pay for your surgeries
Right.
when there
And
are
I,
people that don't agree with it and they have every right to not want to take part in this, to not succumb to it. They have every right. The same way we have every right. We just have to learn to coexist. That's the problem, is we're trying to prove who's right. It's not about who's right. It's that You've got a right to feel how you feel. You've got the right to feel how you feel. Deal with it in your own ways and leave each other alone. This is just, I don't know. That's gotten crazy.
Yeah, it is. And I want to specify, like you said, I'm not upset at the people themselves. I'm upset at the process.
Yes.
Because if you're already in that situation where you're not making much money and you're like, well, hey, this is an opportunity for me, so be it. You know, if you do the surgery or whatever and you're happy and now you want to go work and do your thing, so be it. But for somebody that does have to pay for this, it just seems a little unfair in a sense that
Right.
I'm working hard, I'm doing everything that I have to do, but I don't get any sort of like leeway.
Right. Right. It's unfortunate that we can't like allow someone to just like walk a day through our experience so they can just understand like where we're coming from with that, because it's, again, it's no hate to anybody who has gone that way, with things like you said. You've got friends who have done that. It's no hate in any way. It's just, it definitely stings a little bit, and it sucks because it's like, dude, I gotta work. Like, you and I have kind of talked about my recent job and how absolutely chaotic it is just to keep things afloat there and maintain my income. But I got to do it so that I can support these other things that I want to do. So, and I can't bat an eye. If I do, then everything falls apart. And I don't want that for myself. So should I be punished for that? Like, should I have to pay more because of that? Like, I feel like it should kind of be the opposite a little bit. Cut me a break. I need one. Jesus. So, again, no hate, but it definitely is not fair by any means.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to skip these next two that I have here because we kind of already talked about it a little bit. So I don't want to kind
Okay.
of go over them again, but in a different way. So I want to move on to this next one, which is the Justice Department tasking. So Trump would task the Justice Department with investigating the medical industry to determine if there was a deliberate cover up of long term side effects of sex transitions for financial gain. I
Okay.
I actually think that's a good thing because I think
Yeah.
that does happen. I mean, if you I don't know how many people watch like Jubilee, but I know
Mhm.
that there was a few detransitioners who were talking about that they felt a little bit misguided
Yeah.
in kind of pushed along the process, and they couldn't help but feel that it was for some sort of financial gain throughout that process.
Yeah, where it's like, instead of talking to you like a doctor, they're kind of using salesman tactics, like they're trying to sell you a car or something. Yeah, I've heard a lot of detransitioners talk about that, and like honestly, just look at our world and how people get very greedy very quick. So I mean, of course, by human nature, it's definitely a possibility. And as a trans person, wouldn't you want to know? Wouldn't you want to know who is doing that so that you can go to the best place that actually cares about you? I don't think that's a bad thing either. Like, of course, I want to know who's just transitioning people for financial gain. That's not like, your heart's not in it. You're not in the right place. You don't care about me. So then what else will you do to make money off of me now that you've got my trust? Yeah, take them down. That's fantastic. Yes, we should investigate that 100%.
Yeah, I really don't know who would be against that, and I would love to hear the argument on why they would be against it
Very
because
much so.
that would be very telling of that
Yes.
person.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
So I guess I want to kind of move to the next segment here, which is I don't know how you feel about this one, but trans individuals in sports. So in 2022, Trump told a crowd in Texas that he would ban trans individuals from competing in women's sports. He also made a it says here attack. I don't really know if it's so much an attack versus just
Weaponized
speaking on
words.
it, but trans swimmer Leah Thomas following her record-breaking swim meet in Ohio while she was competing on the University of Pennsylvania's swim team. So, I mean, for anyone who's like been keeping up with the Leah Thomas thing, she actually did like I guess she had like some sort of legal matter, but that did not go her way.
Yes.
She actually failed that,
Yep.
and she cannot compete in the Olympics. Well, actually, let me restate that she can compete, but she would be competing on
She
the
can't
male
compete with
side of thing,
females.
not the females.
Yep.
So, for me, I'm a little iffy on the whole trans sports thing because,
Hmm.
like, for me, I think if it's like a physical sport, you definitely shouldn't. Like, we're
Right.
talking MMA, we're talking things like that.
Right.
You should not be able to compete with biological females.
Yeah.
Now, if we're talking about something like one thing that I thought was absolutely like insane to me was chess. Like competitive chess, trans women cannot compete against biological women within chess, which to
Yeah. I don't know
me
why that matters.
is a exactly, yeah. The thing to me is it's like a little bit odd for that to be something because you know it's almost kind of insulting in a way because you're
Yeah.
saying that biological males have a some sort of superiority,
Intellectual.
intellectual superiority against biological females, which
Yeah.
is not fair to biological females.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah. I don't know why things like chess. No, like that doesn't. That's so silly. That's not a physical, because that's the whole argument, right? Is that biological males have a physical advantage. That's always what you hear when we're talking about this. It's always the physical advantage. So in things like chess, anything related to that realm of things, that's not there's no advantage there. I think trans women should be able to compete in that. Do I see chess as a sport? I guess that's a different taboo topic. But regardless, like I don't really care about sports, right? I think that they're a very I get like the building teamwork and things like that. I think our society as a whole being so obsessed with sports and like football being this like billion-dollar industry and things like that. I think that's silly. That's just the hippie in me, who knows. But ultimately, like you said, in a physical sport, a biological male is more than likely going to have some sort of physical advantage over a biological female. It just is what it is. It's the same like when we talk about how there are differences in a trans man's transition and a trans woman's transition, where sometimes it's a little harder for trans women because testosterone is so strong. Sometimes it's hard for estrogen to chip away at what testosterone has already done. So that's still going to apply in sports. It's just a thing, right? And it's unfortunate, but it just is what it is. It's like, because there's a lot of argument on the other side where should trans men be able to compete with biological men, and that one's hard because I'm like, I don't know, testosterone's pretty crazy. Like it adds to it's not the same. So there's just caveats to it, and I know that's hard to understand, especially on a wide scale. Um, but if we're just gonna strip it down to where everybody can understand, ultimately, yeah, I think that if it's that big of a deal and there's that many trans people upset about it and affected by it, then we should just start a trans league, have a professional trans league of athletes. I don't know what else to do. There's no other way to fix it. You can't make everybody happy, especially on this argument. But you also can't ignore the fact that a biological male will probably have physical advantages over a biological female. It is what it is.
Right, for sure. And the only reason why I kind of got into chess a little bit is because it has been aired on ESPN. So I guess
Right,
with that
right.
being said, I guess it has to be included in the sports category.
Yeah.
But there's other competitions where it's kind of a thing because I think now, I don't know if you've seen the one. I think it was New Hampshire, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
But I know this is not. I don't know if it would be considered to be a sport, but a competition nonetheless. The beauty competition where the trans woman
Yeah.
won the beauty competition.
Hmm.
For me, I actually feel like biological males are at a disadvantage within
Yeah.
that sort of competition. So and the thing about this is one positive thing on Trump's side is there was I'm pretty sure that Trump. I read something that Trump owns like a portion of Miss America or something like that. And
Probably.
so and he actually said that he would have no problem with trans women competing within that. But and I think that that shouldn't be an issue for people because trans women are at a major disadvantage.
Exactly. I mean, especially in
So
that. Sorry, I'm googling to see the Trump
you're good.
trans women beauty pageant.
Yeah,
Wow,
it
I'm
was
a
Miss
genius.
America or something that he owns. I was reading something on that.
Yeah, there's like when you Google it, it pulls up several different articles of Trump welcomes trans women in Miss Universe. There's no exclusion. There's
Miss
no.
Universe. That's what it is. Yeah,
Yeah,
he owns Miss
yeah,
Universe, or has a portion in it, something like that. But that is a positive stance from him on
yeah.
trans women, which is a good thing. That right there should tell people that, hey, you should not be worried about Trump's presidency with trans people if he's supporting them within Miss Universe. He clearly cares about them in some aspect,
Exactly. And I
or
think that,
otherwise he would ban them.
yeah, and it goes back to what we were talking about when, he was talking about taking this out of schools and the transgender insanity. What we were talking about there is like there's other instances where he doesn't have an issue with trans people. This is very specific to taking it out of schools, right? And so this just stands as proof for that. I mean, he's also, hosted a gay wedding at one of his houses. So it's like he doesn't hate gay people or trans people. I think that honestly, he just kind of sees things very similar to you and I and Buck and Blair, and it's just that we need to rein it in a little bit. Things have just gotten way too out of hand. It's painfully obvious. There's never been this much divide within our own community that I've ever experienced in my lifetime. So, he's not against trans people at all. Not from what I can tell. Obviously, I don't know the man, right? I don't know him personally. I don't eat dinner with him, none of that. But it doesn't seem like he's against us, like, at all.
Right. From what I've seen, I would come to the same conclusion, honestly. So I kind of want to move on to Biden here in a way. So the trans military service. So early in his presidency, Biden did reverse the Trump era ban on trans individuals serving in the military, allowing them to serve openly. Now, I know a lot of people have a problem with this because they think, oh, all these trans people are going to go into the military so they can get their surgeries paid for, their hormones paid for, all of these things. Now, I've seen a lot of stories from trans people who have served in the military,
Mhm.
and I do not get that from them. I think they were just genuine people who were already in the military who happened to be
Yes.
trans and then went through that process. So for me, I actually am okay with the reversal of the military ban, just because I have seen so many stories from trans people who were already in the military, and because of that reversal, could now be themselves, and fight for the country. I
Yeah.
think they're already doing like a commendable act,
Exactly.
and I
That's my
think
thing. If
within.
they're willing to fight for your country, don't you think that they deserve to have their surgeries and their hormones? Like, they're a soldier, right? Y'all are all for the soldiers until they're trans. No, like that's still a human being that was willing to go and risk their life for their country. So give it to them. Give it to them. That's not a bad thing. It's not a terrible thing at all. They've earned it. They have earned it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't remember who reversed "Don't Ask, Don't Tell," but that was also a really good thing too, because
I think it was
people
Obama.
can. It might have been Obama, I think so. But regardless, that was a positive thing, because within the military um, you can now be yourself in that aspect, and
Yeah.
for the trans military ban to be a thing now, I don't know if Trump has made a statement that he would reverse it again.
Not that I know of.
I haven't seen anything on that end. Maybe within the reversal, maybe he realized that, maybe he's seen some of those stories and
Yeah.
maybe reversed his thoughts on that. I would hope so, because that would
Right.
be the only
Right.
thing that Trump did that I am against.
Same. Same.
At least there may be other things, but that's at least the one main thing that I might have an issue with. The other things I can get behind, especially the things that we talked about.
Yeah.
So going on to the next thing, I do think that maybe Biden's social media presence is a little bit concerning. So I know that some people had an issue with the Trans Day of Visibility. It actually fell on Easter, I believe, and a lot of people
Yeah.
got upset because they were giving Trans Day of Visibility a thing, but they didn't focus on Easter whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so people got upset with that. So I think, and this is not to say that Trump is any better on the social media side of things. He definitely stirs the pot on social media when given the chance.
Right.
But that was a real big misstep on Biden administration, not considering the day that all of that fell on.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I have. I don't know if it's mixed emotions, but I think with so where it fell was just like a happenstance thing. Trans Day of Visibility is an annual thing. Easter kind of shifts around depending on where the Sunday falls. It just kind of happened to line up. I understand exactly what you're saying, where it's like where the focus was all put on that. Like you probably could have like balanced it a little bit more. But then there's also the argument of like separation of church and state, which doesn't always happen, right? But at that rate, like, is it really the White House's responsibility to shed light on Easter, especially when it is a thing that happens that we know it's Easter, we know it's happening. Like, so I don't know. I don't know how I feel about all of that, and how I feel about Biden. Like my thing with the pushing it and the videos and the social media aspect of it is like they're clearly pandering. Like that administration is very, very much so. Like, let's pander to the alphabet mafia for sure. That's not lost on me. That is very evident. And I think that that just played into it. So of course that's going to upset people, especially when they can now say that, well, you're ignoring Easter. It's just kind of fuel to the fire, regardless of which side you fall on. If you agree with that or not, that's still definitely something that's it's gonna poke the bear. So it was probably a bad call.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to talk about something that happened recently because I think it's a good thing that happened within the federal government side of things.
Okay.
I think I talked to you about this. I can't remember, but I'm sure it's a lot of people know, especially those in the trans community, especially living in Florida. You would have known how affected affirming care was for everybody, not just minors, but for adults as well. But that recently got rolled back by the federal government. They stated that they would not honor that, and therefore people in Florida can now have hormones and things like that. I know folks who I go through actually made a big statement on that, and how you can actually use folks now if you're in the state of Florida, which is great. You don't have to worry about gender affirming care, surgeries, anything like that. If you're an adult. Now, I don't know about the minor side of thing. I don't know if they rolled that back, but I do know that they definitely rolled it back for adults, which is great.
Yes.
So I think the federal government making that a thing to reverse actually shows a little bit of some positive light. So to think that the federal government would cease doing that under Trump's presidency, I'm not sure that would really happen. I think it's just these other things that he's talked about that, you know, the thing is too, is I think a lot of people put too much on the president, just because they want something doesn't always mean that it's going to go through. There's
Right.
other powers who still have a final say in those things. Like with the state ban on affirming care, the federal government reversed that. So the federal government can always step in on those things.
Yep.
And for me, I'm not so worried about that being a thing under the Trump presidency.
Yeah. I think what I'm seeing from this is that there's good and bad in both. At the end of the day, they're both just people. It's the same as like I might like this one person that we work with, but you don't like that coworker for whatever reason. Something went down between you, but they're still a person. So it's just like we're just the blind leading the blind, really. At this point, is what it feels like. And I agree that this is a good thing. I'm glad to see that that was reversed. Like when they start coming for trans adults, that is definitely a problem. That's why I don't fully identify with the right. I guess identify, but I'm not like a full conservative. I'm more of like a centrist, and it's because of things like this. Because there are things like the military ban, like you said, when that first came around. I remember being absolutely enraged by that. I was not a fan of Trump at that point. I was like, dude, what are you doing? Like that is not fair at all. That is an absolutely ridiculous thing to take away from people. So I was super glad to see that reversed as well. So I don't know. I think that hopefully we'll just be okay regardless, right? There's going to be bad that comes with either side, but hopefully it all just kind of pans out because either way, there's going to be bad shit too.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Um, I think that's really everything that I kind of put together for kind of both sides. And within this, we're not trying to sway anyone by chance for voting. Vote
No.
however you feel. I think that's the luxury of living in America is that we do get that choice of voting, and you can vote for whoever you want to. We're not trying to sway you here or anything like that. We're just stating our own opinions and how we feel about either side. Um, because there's both good and negative things that have happened from both angles. So
Yep.
there's enough to speak on in regards to that. But I think people, at least in my mind, have a little bit more against Trump on the trans angle because they think he's really against it, and if Trump wins, we're doomed as trans people. I just don't feel like that's true.
Yeah, no, and it's not even about like, oh, you should support Trump. It's that you shouldn't be led to fear somebody, especially the person that could potentially lead your country, just based on things that you read on the internet or TikToks that you might scroll past on the For You page. You know, do a little bit more digging and try to, to understand like it's not, if you live in fear, that's a choice that you're making. I understand being afraid of things, but it can impact the way that you make decisions ultimately, and you don't think things through all the way. So just be mindful that there are scary things on both sides. It doesn't matter which side we get. So everyone just buckle up, and enjoy the ride, because either way it's going to get interesting. Doesn't matter which way it goes. So, do your thing, vote for who you want to. Just be open and mindful.
Yeah, and the thing too that I want to speak on is that let's just say we're completely wrong and Trump wins the presidency and he puts all this anti-trans legislation into place
Hmm.
that, does affect trans people, then I think everybody, regardless of your political stance, should probably step up and mention something and fight. And maybe at the end of the day, we might be able to come a little closer as a community,
Yeah.
if we fight for the right things, like, yeah, we talked about like the things that we're against that maybe we wouldn't fight for. But if it affects, like, um, hormones for adults and things like that, that's not so great, because that affects everybody in the trans community. So I think for those, I think if that were to happen, then yeah, we need to all fight regardless of political differences.
Yes.
You know, I don't think political differences should really just, X us out from being able to still be a community in some way. Right now, the trans community is not much of a community at all.
No.
Let's be real. But, at the end of the day, something like that would just hopefully bring us together. But let's also hope that does not happen. But if it
Yeah.
does, we'll be ready for it and we'll fight it. But I
Absolutely.
say let's stay, balanced in our thinking and, not, have this really rough standpoint on this person just because of some things you might have heard. Do your research and things like that, because if I was honest, I thought maybe he was against, trans people at first
Yeah.
until I did my research and I found the whole thing about the beauty competition. For me,
Right.
I could not say that somebody's against trans people if they're allowing them in a beauty competition that he has money or some sort of ownership involved in. There's no
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. No, definitely not. Definitely not.
So with that, I want to, unless you have any closing words here, I pretty much think that I've covered all the things that I want to cover. Unless you have some things you'd like to go over as well.
Yeah, no, I think we got it all. We didn't get too far into anything outside the trans realm, so that's good. No, I think we covered it. And again, it's like these lessons go for the left and the right, right? We're not,
Right.
targeting any one side, both sides. Just consider certain things. Even if you're all pro Trump, consider that there's also bad things that Trump has done. If you're all pro Biden, understand that there's bad things Biden's done too. I think we just like it. The main goal of all of our videos, right, is just coming back to reality, being realistic about things. So hopefully that's what you guys took from this. I had fun talking about it and diving in, and I feel like I definitely learned something. So hopefully everybody else did too.
Yeah, I hope so as well. And I do want to say that, for anyone that's watching on YouTube, I would like for you to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the content. 80% of you are not subscribed. So if you like it and you enjoy, please subscribe. And, in regards to Spotify, if you wouldn't mind rating us on Spotify, as that's a way that you can help the show. go a little bit more forward is by rating it. Currently, we only have one rating. We are at 5 stars on the rating, but we do definitely need more in regards to that. I know that I've heard a lot of positive things from people in regards to this podcast, but feel free to comment on things, share your opinions. That's what we do this for. We welcome those opinions. uh, any positive thoughts or anything, feel free to share them. We always review the comments and things like that, so don't be afraid to comment or anything like that. But we definitely appreciate your support and watching or listening on Spotify, either one. And with that, everyone have a great one, and thanks for listening and watching.
See you in the next one.